Well, to paraphrase Winston Churchill, the government is either at your feet or at your throat. And in some cases, they're in your head. We're talking about weapons of mass control. And we all know that the government is all about controlling us, even though it appears we have less and less control of the government. Joining us today to tell us about weapons of mass control is Dr. John Hall. He's an MD, an anesthesiologist from San Antonio, and he has an amazing story to tell. Welcome, Dr. Hall. Tell us how you got into this, because you're an anesthesiologist, so tell us how you got into people coming to you about voices in their head.
Well, a little unusual story. I am an anesthesiologist in San Antonio, Texas. I had a girl come to me complaining of being stalked and getting voices in her head. Did a little checking. I had known the family, I had known the girl for some time. No history of mental illness, no drug history in the past. So I gave her the benefit of the doubt before sending her to a psychiatrist. Did some checking, did some bugging of her place with audio. She requested no video cameras, but she did allow audio, and had some people driving around checking on her. And as it turns out, she was being stalked by a former FBI agent that runs a private investigative agency in San Antonio. They were breaking into her house, putting Rohypnol in bottled water and other food substances in her place.
And what does that do, Rohypnol?
Rohypnol is a date rape drug. It blocks your memory. And were essentially sexually assaulting her, using her as a sex slave. But the interesting thing about the way they were doing it, and which gets into the electromagnetic technology, is they were breaking in, putting Rohypnol in the bottled water, and subliminally controlling her to drink where the drug was placed.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting. So when did this happen? What
this
year?
all happened prior to 2006.
Because this has been an open secret for some time. It's something that's not talked about very much, although we do have articles here from the Washington Post. We've got articles from Wired Magazine. They've been talking about this here and then in articles since the early 2000s. So you can find some articles going back earlier than that even. And we've got pretty much every branch of the military has got their own little projects, and as well as commercial applications.
Oh yeah, mind control technology is one of the most common crimes, at least vocalized or complained about on the internet today. It seems to be getting the least amount of coverage in the major media.
Wow.
So that's why when we went to the police and had the identities of the stalkers, there's no way to prove the electromagnetic technology, but we could prove the stalking, and we could prove the sexual assault. And we're told by the police that, well, the guy doing this to you is former FBI, he's a private investigator, he stalks people for a living, that's what he does. And she had no memory.
Sexually assaults people for a living, that's what he does.
And she has no memory of the sexual assaults due to the Rohypnol, at least not good enough memory to bring a case. And it's like the police told us, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
Yeah, it's also who you know.
And who you know. So the next best thing, I thought, you know what, I need to write all this down in a book. Of course, the names have slightly been changed since we couldn't bring any of them to prison. Once the book came out, then I saw that I was immediately inundated with thousands of other people voicing the same complaints of organized stalking, of directed energy weapons attacks, burning, twitching, severe headaches, blurred vision, as well as hearing the voices of their perpetrators in their head or in their surroundings while they're being attacked.
Wow. Well, let me go down the list of some of these that I came up with. We've got DARPA has a sonic projector that was reported on in 2007. Of course, it had been around for quite some time before then. Army has something they call voice to skull. We've got the Air Force using microwaves to create sounds at Brooks Air Force Base. We've got the Marine Corps with their Medusa project. We've got the State Department, as reported by the Washington Post in 2005, working on voices implanted in people's heads. We've got a couple of companies, one that has patented something called hypersound. That's American Technologies. Has also got Holosonic Research Labs, also has a patented version. So the military-industrial complex has been all over this. When you see something this wide, this is not just one little research project from one organization. And this is something that 5, 10 years ago, it was being reported on in even mainstream press like the Washington Post, and yet nobody knows about this.
Well, the people who follow the internet pretty closely, and certainly the victims of this technology, know about it. But you're right, there's been a lot of research done into how to put voices into one's head. It was found long ago that if you can put a voice into someone's head, you can do several things. If I put a voice that's foreign to your normal thought pattern in your head, that becomes harassment. and the harassment over time will make you display signs of schizophrenia. When you go and tell people that you're hearing voices, we've been patterned to turnkey see that as schizophrenia and not even look to see if there's a legitimate source for it. If I put a voice in your head that's in your voice, and if you pattern a thought, like I tell some of these victims, when you read a book, you're actually hearing your own voice in your head as you read. If I put that voice in your head, then that becomes a thought, and you'll act on those thoughts, and that's how they think that some of this is being used for subliminal control.
Wow. I know that in some of these articles I was reading on the mid-2000s, they were talking about how they were using it as a voice of God, as the voice of Allah, because they figured that it was something that they could use. They thought that the people that they were going against that were Muslims were very religious, superstitious.
And that was used in the field of battle. The voice of God weapon, which is actually called SQUAD, or Silent Sound Spread Spectrum, was used in the first Operation Desert Storm. That was one of those scenarios where 1,500 Iraqi soldiers disassembled their weapons, got to their knees, and surrendered to 150 Marines who didn't have enough slip ties to tie them all together, because, and this was admitted, that they used SQUAD to put the voice of Allah in their heads to tell them to surrender.
Wow.
Before that, in the mid to late 80s, 5 separate inmates from the Utah State Prison had written affidavits saying that they were put in solitary confinement and were experimented on with some type of electronic device that put voices in their head, and all of them claimed that they could tell the voices of the people doing the experimentation on them were responding back to their thoughts.
Wow.
So this has been going on for a while. Unfortunately, it's just not gotten any major media coverage until recently.
So they're basically setting themselves up as the ventriloquists, and we're the dummies or the zombies, right?
Well, it's like I've said in with other reporters and other shows, that guns and taxes won't control everybody.
Yeah.
Electromagnetic technology will.
Wow. Wow. And we know that too. I mean, I've said for the longest time that the IRS really wasn't so much about getting your money. It wasn't about revenue. It was really about controlling you. It was a way of offering you carrots and sticks. And of course, they're only collecting enough to pay the interest to the Federal Reserve. They were created at the same time. But this is something. So we all know that the government is into controlling us, right? And whatever they can use. And they've had very, very simple ways to control us in the past. I mean, they've got the media, they've got schools, they've got the income tax system. Everything that the government is doing is targeted towards controlling us. So of course they're going to have every branch of government working on this type of thing, because that gives them very precise control over what we're doing.
Well, and with the new revelations coming out about the NSA, 10 years ago when I first started writing about some of this and getting into this type of science, it did seem sci-fi and it did seem far-fetched to a lot of people, especially a lot of people thought the brain was too complex to manipulate that way. Since some of Snowden's leaked records about the NSA, most of us already knew that the NSA was listening to our phone calls.
And we were accused of being paranoid.
Yeah, and exactly.
Right.
Accused
so
of
now we're accused of being schizophrenic if we hear voices, but we know that there's some reality of that.
But it's not too far of a stretch if they have computers big enough to collect all the data on our text, on our cell, and on our emails. And then it came to light that they admitted that several NSA agents were using NSA technology to target love interest. And it was happening so frequently that instead of HUMINT for humans intelligence or SIGINT for signals intelligence, that they actually have one that they refer to as LOVEINT. And these were agents that were actually targeting either girls they saw or met that wanted to watch them, or ex-spouses or current spouses with NSA technology. And it's happening frequent enough that it's called LOVEINT.
Well, it's always like any technology. It can be used for good or it can be used for evil. I don't know if there's any good use for putting voices in people's heads, but certainly what this reveals is the dark side of people that are involved in this. And we've seen this in the past. We've seen people very high up in the NSA, like Michael Aquino, who was a Satanist, who founded the Temple of Set. So we know that there's some very dark, I would even say Dr. Strangelove type of characters who are involved in this. So it's really not surprising that that would happen. But we've had some revelations about connections to this, possibly with the recent Navy Yard shooting. Tell us about that. Well, stay tuned. Right after the show, we're going to have a lot more of this interview with Dr. John Hall, and he's going to explain to us the connection between electronic harassment and what Aaron Alexis wrote on his gun, My ELF Weapon. Subscribers to Prison Planet TV gain access to all this content and more, and they get it right away. Well, that's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Now you can watch The Alex Jones Show live as it happens at Infowars.com/show.
You'll find links to all of our content there and a free 15-day trial for Prison Planet TV.
More than 60 movies and documentaries all in one place at Infowars.com/show.
Well, welcome back. We've got the continuance of that interview with Dr. John Hall, and he's going to explain to us what was meant by My ELF Weapon. And he's also going to go into a lot more detail about how people all over the country are being harassed electronically.
When I first saw the Navy Yard shooting, putting that in conjunction with the last two mass shootings that we've had as well, the Sandy Hook shooting and the Colorado shooting, most of us that are working in this technology were already a little bit suspicious that maybe there was some control issues going on. We know that our current administration desperately wants gun control. As a matter of fact, if you notice the early stories coming out immediately after the Navy Yard shooting, you know, all of the pundits were saying it was an AR-15. They immediately jumped on the fact that this was an AR-15. Well, it wasn't an AR-15 at all. It was a shotgun and a handgun.
And he even led up to it the day before. Obama went on Stephanopoulos' Sunday talk show and talked about how 80–90% of the people wanted gun control. That's not true.
Yeah,
80–90% of the people are against him on Syria. They're not with him on gun control.
No, not at all. So when I saw this, so, you know, putting it into the rest of the context that they need these mass shootings in order to pass their gun control agenda, I'm already a little bit suspicious. Well, then when I saw that he had complained to the police, and he tried to seek out help, he went to the police and said that he had had an altercation in the airport, that he felt like he was followed, and that there were people putting voices in his head and vibrations into the room at his hotel meant to sleep deprive him, which incidentally, most of the victims of this technology that I work with all suffer from sleep deprivation by that very same means. Then I knew we were onto something, that this guy probably was being victimized himself before he went and did the shooting. When I saw that he had etched into the side of his shotgun, "This is my ELF weapon," that pretty much told me, and this guy worked in the field. You know,
he's not talking about Legolas. What's the connection with ELF?
Extremely low frequency waves, and extremely low frequency waves are very easily used to manipulate the human brain. The human brain is very responsive to ELF waves. As a matter of fact, HAARP generates ELF waves by heating up the ionosphere and bouncing ELF waves back to the planet.
And the ELF waves are used to communicate with submarines. So that would be one connection with the Navy Yard.
Out of Michigan and Wisconsin, 56 miles of antennas there to communicate under the sea with submarines with ELF waves. They're unshieldable for the most part. They travel through the Earth. They've also noticed that during seismic events where the Earth releases an abundance of its own ELF waves, that you typically see more UFO sightings around those areas, and they think that it's an effect from the ELF waves on human beings' temporal lobes of the brain, that might be done. Michael Persinger at Laurentian did a lot of research with ELF waves, showed that you could stimulate the temporal lobes of the brain with ELF and microwave and give people a sentinel being effect where you felt like someone was in a room with you. He even was able to simulate alien abduction using that. So we know the brain is very sensitive to them. That in conjunction with putting voices in somebody's head, I don't think he went to that Navy Yard being subliminally controlled by this technology to do this. They may have been attempting to subliminally control him to shoot someplace else, but by etching that in the side of his weapon, I think he went to the area where he thought the source of the voices was coming from, as more as a protective effort or a vengeance effort, not a controlled effort.
Right. So if he did some research, found out that ELF is being used to put voices in your head, and he saw that even if that wasn't what they were doing at the Navy Yard, he saw they had a big ELF thing. That's a very interesting connection. Now talk to us about how you distinguish between something that is artificially being beamed in, voices being beamed into you with this technology, versus somebody who really is schizophrenic.
I'm glad you asked that, because I especially being a medical doctor, I don't want to come across as everybody hearing voices is being victimized by technology. Certainly schizophrenia exists. For one, schizophrenia is not quite as common I think, as the press has led people to believe. It's still, severe schizophrenia is still a relatively rare disorder. Most of the victims that I've worked with can pinpoint the day that they started hearing voices and the day that they noticed organized stalking, people following them around from their home to work. Most of the victims that we've had questionnaires filled out on and talked to are in their late 30s to early 40s. Typically, schizophrenics are identified from 18 years old to 28 years old, maybe a little later in females, but almost always at a young age. Typically, those people are described as never having been quite normal. You don't see it in high-functioning, educated individuals who all of a sudden turned 40 years old and acutely became schizophrenic overnight. Also, if you talk to schizophrenics about what they're hearing, typically it's God or angels or deities or garbled voices like you hear in a subway. The people that are being victimized by this technology are hearing the voices of people that are obviously watching them. Oftentimes they'll know the names of these voices because it's a two-way communication system. So they're hearing the people doing the surveillance talk to each other as well as talk to them. Typically it's their whereabouts in a room is being described, what they're dressed like is being described.
So it's kind of a form of harassment then.
Well, and that's exactly what the loose term for it is, electronic harassment.
So they're not necessarily trying to pretend that they're God. They're just really trying to harass this person and push them over the edge.
Exactly.
Into doing something. Well, that's interesting. So to sum it up, somebody who has real schizophrenia, it's going to be something that is very early in their life, a consistent pattern behavior from very early in their life. Whereas somebody that is that is having this done to them, they're going to have a sudden onset of that.
Exactly.
So they've been perfectly normal, then somehow, and later in life, all of a sudden, like you said, a switch has been flipped.
Exactly. And we've done surveys on thousands of these victims, and most of them are educated. A lot of them are doctors and lawyers, educated people that were high functioning, that were successful in their careers, and one day started hearing voices, started being stalked, and watched their lives spiral downhill after that. And the other
kind of Democrat. I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. The other thing with schizophrenia is schizophrenia does respond to treatment. You can put schizophrenics on medication and they'll improve. People that are being victimized by this technology, you can put them on any array of the medications used for schizophrenia or delusional disorder, and they still hear the voices. They still get stalked, and they still get attacked.
Wow. Wow. Another important difference. Now, have you done any kind of, you looked at them being typically professionals, that sort of thing. Have you done any kind of demographic information saying that there was some kind of a political affiliation with these people, or something where they maybe they had security clearance? Because we've seen how the government is specifically targeting Tea Party groups and groups that they perceive as being hostile to them.
Actually, demographics have been done through an organization called Freedom from Covert Surveillance and Harassment. That's one of many human rights organizations that have actually formed to handle the vast number of exponentially growing complaints of this kind of victimization. This is a growing thing. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. Freedom has done, Freedom from Covert Surveillance and Harassment has done surveys to get the demographics. It doesn't seem to have a gender bias, a racial bias. It seems to be pretty equal between blacks and whites. It does seem to have a predominant female bias. 70% of the victims are female. Most of them are also voicing complaints of sexual assault.
Right, yeah, that would be the connection.
The political bias we haven't seen. Matter of fact, most of the victims I've worked with are apolitical. Most of them aren't radicals.
Are they people who have worked with the government in some way or might know something?
I have had a number of whistleblowers that have come forward, several former NSA people, several National Reconnaissance Office people, that were whistleblowers that have come to me seeking advice on how to escape being targeted.
So now you've written a book talking about how this all came. You basically talked about this case that brought you into this, as well as research that you've done, but you're also working on a movie as well.
Yes, there was a screenplay written on a movie based on a true story, based on A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America.
And that's the name of your book?
Yeah. Give
us the name of your book again?
New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America.
And where can people find that?
Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, or at newbreedmovie.com.
Okay, good. Good. All right, so you're doing a movie of this, and it's not a documentary, it's actually a dramatization, is that correct?
No, we decided not to do a documentary, mainly because a documentary only attracts a certain number of people who want to come and watch that. And it doesn't matter how much fact you back up a documentary with, people are still going to walk away wondering whether it's true. Unfortunately, in today's society, people are more likely to believe a drama based on a true story, or plain fiction than they are a documentary. So we wanted something that was going to be entertaining and educate at the same time. So we've chose to actually do it a drama based on a true story.
Oh, that's really smart. That's important too. It's one of the things that we were looking at with the Operation Paul Revere. We understand that when you do a news broadcast, people need to know what's going on. It's kind of like an intelligence report. When you're going to wake people up, we found that a lot of people will look at all this. We don't have time in a news broadcast to go behind and document everything that leads up to this, like we're, even in an extended interview like this. So a documentary will wake a lot of people up. But we also know that more people, as you mentioned, are going to be affected by something that is a dramatization. They can identify with the people, and it seems more real to them than if you carefully document everything in a news report or an article or a documentary. If they see a fictionalized report, it's a very powerful thing.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why we kind of went for that genre. Everybody wants to go see a good movie. Only the believers are going to come see a documentary.
That's right, that's true. So as you wake people up, what would you like to see happen to stop this?
What most of the victims want to see is a congressional hearing to get to the legitimate truth from the CIA and the NSA of exactly what the technology is they're being experimented.
Something like the Church Committee hearings.
Or the Rockefeller Commission, exactly. That didn't actually stop MK Ultra.
That's right.
The Freedom of Information stopped, but obviously the research went on. But most of these victims are just looking for validation. And that's one of the things that my book has done. At least there's one physician that believes them that they are being victimized by technology and being experimented on. We're also looking for legislation to change in this country that makes it illegal to experiment on you without your consent. Believe it or not, the common rule, our current legislation, doesn't protect the public from experimentation on them by the government. John Glenn tried to pass that legislation years ago and was shot down in Congress. I spoke at the Bioethics Commission that Obama appointed when we had to apologize to the Guatemalans for experimenting on them. I was the only person there that pointed out the flaws in the common rule, that the common rule is so poorly written that it allows us to be experimented on.
Oh, absolutely. We've covered cases where the EPA is feeding diesel fumes directly to people and trying to make them sick so they can change the particulate regulations that they've got going.
So that's kind of the two things we're really looking for, and of course looking for it to stop. And if we can make non-consensual experimentation truly illegal in this country, then at least hopefully that will help.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hall, for joining us. Thank you for sharing that with everyone and bringing this out in the open. More people need to understand what this is about, and hopefully we can do something about it. Hopefully we can rein in an out-of-control government that's trying to control everything about us.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks for helping expose it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's not just Voice of God technology or MK Ultra programs where the government controls our mind. We've got a documentary that is exclusive on DVD from InfoWarsStore.com, State of Mind. And there you'll find out all the many different ways that government controls the population. It's not just these high-tech, secretive, covert methods. It's also things like the media. It's things as mundane as schools. It's an entire full spectrum of control. The government's not going to use just one thing. So educate yourself, educate your friends and your family to protect yourself from this type of mind control. You can get State of Mind at InfoWarsStore.com. Well, that's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.